This is Transqat, a safe space to stand. Transgender issues, queer people, respectful conversations. I'm host Clare McCarthy. Welcome to Transqat. Welcome to the second in a series of mini episodes about the snowmageddon of executive orders that are being issued from the White House. These things are awful, and I'm reading them so that you don't have to. Last time, we took a look at Executive Order 14168, titled Defending Women from Gender Ideology Extremism and Restoring Biological Truth to the Federal Government. Today, it's 14187, entitled, Protecting Children from Chemical and Surgical Mutilation. Note the language. They're protecting, not attacking, not erasing. The Policy and Purpose section uses language that, again, is intentionally provocative. Maiming, sterilizing, radical, false, irreversible, a stain on our nation's history, mutilated, horrifying tragedy. You get the point. It refers to impressionable children. So let's look at that. Yes, children are impressionable. They take in messages from their peers, their family, their faith, the media, and occasionally their teachers. But kids are really adept at ignoring the messages that they decide don't pertain to them. Tell a teenager to clean her room and see what happens. As a teacher, I assigned homework regularly. The vast majority of my students were able to decide all on their own, I don't think so. I've got better things to do. America's youth are not being led Pied Piper-like into gender-affirming care. They are able to watch Breaking Bad and decide that dealing meth is not for them. The second paragraph begins, quote, countless children soon regret that they have been mutilated. Where to start? No children, none, are mutilated via gender-affirming care. Surgery is an option for those over 18. Puberty blockers do no harm. They simply pause the body changes, thereby minimizing the dysphoria that trans kids have. Should the child decide to discontinue them, the body just resets to exactly where it was before blockers were introduced. No harm done, primum non nocere. Countless children, though, is a shrewd word choice. These kids are countless because Project 2025 refused to count them. According to the NIH, the regret rate for gender-affirming procedures, and when we're talking about surgery, we're only talking about adults because there are no surgeries for youth, but that regret rate is 1%. Let me say that again. 1%. The regret rate for chemo is between 11 and 42%. 24% of mastectomy patients regretted their life-saving surgery. A story from the Reuters news agency cites 1,390 6 to 17-year-olds started taking puberty blockers in 2022. Statistically, therefore, 1,376 of those kids had no regrets. And for many of those 1,376, puberty blockers kept them alive through adolescence. And again, statistically, we're talking about 14 kids who decided to stop taking the blockers. Now, let's say, just for the sake of argument, that all 14 of these remaining kids sincerely decided that medical transition was not for them. That means, brace yourselves, 14 kids stopped taking puberty blockers and returned to their regularly scheduled program. But here's the thing. Data is not collected on why patients, to use a very problematic word, detransition. Did their parents lose health insurance? Were they economically unable to continue treatments? Did the social pressures of transitioning, separation from family, the threat of homelessness, religious pressure, hate-mongering from the government, bullying either in schools or online, force them back into the closet? Did they decide that social transitioning would be enough for them? Maybe, after exploring their options, they decided that non-binary or genderqueer were terms that better suited them. Were there contraindications that made hormone replacement therapy inadvisable? All these very plausible motivations negate the premise that detransitioning, again, my apologies for that word, is solely the province of some anti-trans epiphany. What's more, it drops the number of kids this executive order is, and here I'm using the largest possible air quotes, protecting, to, at most, 3. The sentence continues that these children, quote, begin to grasp the horrifying tragedy that they will never be able to conceive children of their own or nurture their children through breastfeeding. A snarky aside, are there tragedies that are not horrifying, or is that just Project 2025 reaching for a pleonasm? In which case, congratulations on your use of rhetorical devices. Notice that whereas Executive Order 14168 focused on people assigned male at birth who were, according to that order, trying to game the system somehow, here we're focused on people assigned female at birth. Is it a tragedy if a cis-het couple can't conceive? Or is it just a challenge that might be solved via IVF or adoption? I know plenty of birth parents who are unable to breastfeed. There might have been some disappointment, but they and the kids are fine. Horrifying tragedy seems a little hyperbolic. This is part of the underlying misogyny of Project 2025.
We're effectively run in this country via the Democrats, via our corporate oligarchs, by a bunch of childless cat ladies who are miserable at their own lives and the choices that they've made, and so they want to make the rest of the country miserable too. If you look at Kamala Harris, Pete Buttigieg, AOC, the entire future of the Democrats is controlled by people without children.
The proper role, they assert, of people assigned female at birth is to bear children. Entering the workplace, living single or married without kids makes a woman suspect, lesser.
You're gonna make it after all.
The right has leaned heavily on the testimony of 2 individuals in making these false claims about transmasculine folks. Jamie Reed, a so-called whistleblower, and professional detransitioner Chloe Cole. Their testimonies are theatrical, and they use all the right buzzwords, almost as if the scripts had been prepared for them. But they're also very well paid for their testimony with money coming from the Christian right. I love the sentence that warns that gender-affirming care might result in a lifetime of increased medical bills. Well, here's a suggestion. Fix the healthcare crisis.
Despite spending, as you indicated, 2 or 3 times as much per capita on healthcare as other nations, we have 85 million people who are uninsured, underinsured. We have all kinds of chronic illnesses. Our life expectancy is lower than other countries. And for working class people in this country, they are living 6, 7 years shorter lives than the top 1%. We got a problem. Okay? Last year, the insurance industry in this country made over $70 billion, while at the same time, 85 million Americans are uninsured or underinsured. Do you agree with me that the United States should join every other major country on earth and guarantee health care to all people as a human right?
The section concludes by stating that the U.S. will not fund, sponsor, promote, assist, or support the so-called transition of a child. So right now, organizations across the country are considering halting services to trans or non-binary people, or frankly anyone, for fear of losing funding. Section 2 misrepresents the use of puberty blockers, cross-hormone treatments, and surgical procedures. WPATH is the World Professional Association for Transgender Health. And if you count the years it was known as the Harry Benjamin Standards, then they've been doing actual research about trans folks for about 46 years. And Harry Benjamin's work was built on the foundation laid by Magnus Hirschfeld in Berlin until his institute was looted and burned by Nazi youth in 1933. Section 3 refers to the WPATH standards as junk science, which, quote, lacks scientific integrity. Since the appeal to common sense was a regular meme of the campaign, let's use it here. Decades of scientific data and expertise versus something Russell Vought wrote. Which would you rely on if your child's health and life were at stake? The phrase rapid onset gender dysphoria is used throughout.
Like, how is that even a thing?
Rapid onset gender dysphoria is not a clinically acceptable term. It's unsupported, and it's controversial by, real doctors. Section 4 creates a chilling effect for research grants and medical school studies that might otherwise compile and analyze the data that could help us get better treatment for trans people. Section 5 lists documents that are to be scoured and scrubbed of references to this non-existent problem. Section 6 amends TRICARE, the health insurance of the Department of Defense. So if you served your country and your child is trans, best of luck to you. Uncle Sam is turning its back. Section 7 amends federal employee health benefits. Ditto. Section 8 reclassifies transmasculine surgeries as female genital mutilation. Actual female genital mutilation refers to the 230 million girls in 30 countries in Africa, the Middle East, and Asia. And thus, this phrase enacts a trifecta of white Christian nationalism: transphobia, racism, and Islamophobia. The World Health Organization classifies this real female genital mutilation as a violation of human rights. Now, 47's administration could draw on that to strengthen their argument, but of course, 47 is withdrawing the U.S. from the WHO. Section 8 ensures a lengthy statute of limitations should parents and children who regret their transition decide to sue. This sets up a financial incentive for suing doctors, hospitals, and everyone who provides gender-affirming care. Its intent is to scare professionals out of providing proper and appropriate care. Last item before the boilerplate legalese is that the federal government should prioritize investigations into sanctuary states like Connecticut, where I live. Look, we are, as a society, at a point where we're learning about gender identity. And since forever, some people react to new learning with fear and suspicion and resistance. In the 15th century, Filippo de Strata wrote, "The pen is a virgin, but the printing press is a whore." Philosopher Jean Baudrillard wrote, "The greatest threat to our civilization is not nuclear weapons, but television." And I'm certain that if you go far enough back in time, there was a guy banging two rocks together trying to get a spark, and behind him stood three other guys saying, if God had meant for us to be warm, he'd have given us pelts like the mastodons. In the upcoming weeks, we'll be looking at the executive orders about trans folks in the military, DEI programs, and education. Spoiler alert, none of it is good news. This has been Transqat. I'm Clare McCarthy. Thank you for listening, and let's talk soon.